Welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we provide thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. Because if you're on this show, you probably are a wholesale change agent. Today, we have one topic that we planned and another topic that came up out of the blue. My name is Ian Heller. I'm the Chief Thought Leadership Officer or Chief Strategy Officer. I can't remember my own title. I need some more coffee this morning, Jonathan, for Distribution Strategy Group. And I'm delighted to welcome in my business partner, the lovely and charming Doctor of Distribution, Jonathan Bein, PhD. How are you this morning, Jonathan?
Always flattered and delighted to work with the most brilliant guy in the room.
He ain't here, pal. You're stuck with me.
Okay.
So I mentioned two topics this morning. One is leveraging customer loyalty programs for long-term growth. So we're delighted to have Lincoln Smith with us from HMI Incentives. So he'll be here in a minute. Hi, Lincoln. How are you this morning? Oh, you can join our discussion, Lincoln. So
good morning, Brian, or good morning, Jonathan and Ian.
And that's the nature of this show, man. It's all live, and we roll with the flow. But first, we want to talk about some big news this week where the Home Depot acquired HD Supply. Now, I wrote a column on this morning. It's on distributionstrategy.com, so you can read that. But we just wanted to share some thoughts with you about this big development. I worked for HD Supply Whitecap, the construction supplies division, for 7 years from 2010 to 2017. So we do have some thoughts on it that we think you're not going to see elsewhere. So if you haven't heard about the deal, Home Depot paid about $8 billion in enterprise value for HD Supply. That was a 25% premium over the pre-announcement stock price. And interestingly, a week before this deal was announced, Lowe's issued this press release out of the blue, at least to me, that said, rumors that we are in discussions to buy HD Supply are not true. We will make no further comments. So that was a little bit eyebrow raising. And then a week later, Home Depot announced that they were buying HD Supply, which made it seem like there was probably a two-suitor battle at some point in time. But I wanted to talk about why I think this is such a great turn of events for HD Supply. I think, it's for not just because it's a good multiple and a good return for shareholders, but because it's competitively smart. So if you look at what's happening in this sort of on what I call on the carpet MRO, so non-industrial MRO, you've got these two behemoths moving in. Home Depot identifies their current MRO target markets as these, right? So this is really all the on the carpet MRO, the non-industrial MRO. Home Depot says that 45% of their sales go to businesses and not consumers, and they're a $112 billion company. So that means they're a $50 billion distributor. They're building 200 fulfillment centers right now. They've got 150 distribution centers, nearly 2,000 stores. They've already bought a few MRO distributors, and now they've got HD Supply. So they're coming hard at this market. Well, on the other side, you've got Amazon Business, and nobody's really sure how big they are, who's not in the know at Amazon, but they're probably 20 billion, 25 billion, something like that. They're definitely huge. And they are targeting these markets: commercial, education, government, and healthcare. Well, if you go to the HD Supply site and see who they target, what you'll see is every vertical that HD Supply targets is already targeted by Home Depot, and 3 out of 5 are targeted by Amazon Business. So you've got these two behemoths moving in, squeezing this market. And HD Supply is not an industrial distributor. They're really, commercial and multifamily and healthcare, et cetera. And this was probably not going to be a long-term win for them. They would probably have been eroding market share over time. No, who knows, right? Maybe they would have been fine. But given the competitive environment and the way it's shaping up, it just seemed to me that to get this 25% multiple over your stock price was absolutely the right thing to do. And kudos to Joe D'Angelo, who's the CEO there, and his team for making this deal happen. And as I wrote in my article, if you had any significant holdings in HD Supply, you should probably send Joe D'Angelo a Christmas gift this year. And if it's proportionate to the value he created for you, you're probably going to send him a Ferrari. Jonathan, Lincoln, you guys have any thoughts on this deal?
Well, first thought is the numbers that you're reporting, if we're viewing Home Depot now as a distributor, at least in this part of the market, that would make them the largest durable goods product distributor in the world today.
Yeah, and they probably are.
Yeah, that means they're bigger than Sonopar. They're bigger than Amazon Business, right?
Probably, yes.
So that's really significant.
Yeah, they're massive. And all this stuff is on their web. I mean, I have a bunch of links in the article, and it'll take you to everything from their 2019 shareholders investor presentation to their annual report, to public statements they've made. They're not really covering up their strategy. They're not hiding what they're doing. They've got a whole website full of that's just for pros. I think it's called Home Depot Pro. That's also in the article. But I mean, look, they're coming hard at this market. And
that's exactly right. And that's more of this asymmetric retail coming into wholesale as opposed to wholesale coming into retail. Right?
Yeah, wholesalers aren't trying to become fantastic online sellers like Amazon Business, and they're not trying to go after the retail market. So you get this asymmetric battle with distributors squeezed in the middle. And I think, HD Supply cashed out at the right time. And especially with the beating that all these commercial MRO distributors have taken, HD Supply gets, I think they said 16 or 18% of their sales through hospitality, and that got crushed. But I think multifamily has a chance of coming back strong.
Just real quick, Ian, I know you had obviously worked with the HD Supply, so I know your article kind of went into a lot of your perspective on it, but were you surprised by this or the timing of it, in your opinion? I know you talked a lot about it, but just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on it as far as any surprise there.
Yeah, the first hint that I had that anything was up was when Lowe's did their press release, and they even said, we don't normally comment on rumors. In this case, we'd like to say we're not in discussions with HD Supply and are not intending to be, which I read as, however, we recently were. So I guess I didn't see that coming at all. And then when I read that Home Depot had bought them, it kind of was less of a surprise because of what Lowe's had said. Now, I'm not surprised that HD Supply sold out. I mean, those are savvy folks over there, and they used to be part of Home Depot, including Joe D'Angelo, the CEO. So there's already a friendly relationship there, and they're both in Atlanta. They're just a few miles down the road from each other, about to be co-located, I assume. And so I can't say I'm generally surprised. I had no insight that this was happening at this time. What I was surprised at was the amount that Home Depot paid. Having said that, it's accretive to their earnings already, slightly. I mean, they're such a big, Home Depot's so gigantic, it won't even make a difference in their earnings announcement, but it is slightly accretive to their earnings. So unlike some people, I think it actually makes sense for Home Depot. And I also think, like Jonathan and our other friend pointed out, it keeps Lowe's out of this market, which I think is a smart move. So I didn't see it coming, but it doesn't surprise me now that it's happened.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
There's going to be a lot more. I mean, we've been calling this for a while. There's going to be a lot more consolidation in MRO. Now, companies like Grainger have a lot more of an industrial sales base, but Grainger also does a whole bunch of multifamily, hospitality, healthcare, government, commercial business, right? So it will be interesting to see how that shapes up, or if there will be is someone going to roll up the industrial side of this? Because there are a lot of distributors that are, like Motion, they don't really sell any of this stuff, or at least they probably do, but most of their business is in power transmissions. And I don't see either of these companies getting into that. So you do wonder if there's going to be a third entity that rolls up on the industrial side, which would seem to make sense to me.
Well, it seems like it might be a matter of time before we hear some kind of announcement from Walmart that they bought somebody, right?
Maybe. I mean, Walmart and Google are kind of mysteries to me, because like Google Shopping has a lot of B2B products. Walmart.com has a lot of B2B products, but neither one of them does anything for the business market specifically. Google's smart speaker is called Google Home, which is a complete miss on a brand name. If you're trying to put these devices in business environments, Walmart doesn't to this day have any kind of open account at all. You just have to use a credit card. So one of those companies might get savvy. Walmart has a history of copying what Amazon does. So you would think at some point in time they'd start Walmart for Business. They do have a part of their site called Walmart for Business, but it's not really a separate site. So we'll see. I think, like I said, there's a room for an industrial player. Do you see an industrial distributor trying to roll up the industrial side of this, Jonathan? Does anybody got the capital and the resources?
You're saying an industrial distributor doing a roll up?
Yeah. So, if you combine Grainger and Motion and Advanced and a few, I mean, if you could somebody roll up on the industrial side, the Lawsons Lawson's not really industrial, but that industrial, but
Yeah, I mean, I think the first scenario you mentioned is more realistic. The thing that's a scary thought is if you look at the market caps of, take your 10 largest distributors, um, Ferguson, Granger, take Amazon could buy half or all of those, and it would barely affect their balance sheet.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the market cap of Amazon is several times greater than the top 100 public distributors market cap. I mean, just take that in. Several times
Yeah.
greater than the top 100 public distributors market cap.
But they're still ignoring the industrial market.
Fair enough.
So it seems like there might be something there. We do have a comment from somebody here. Let's see.
Jason. It's from Jason.
Curious about the table showing Amazon businesses not in hospitality, given their footprint in food service, including equipment. How is that category defined? I might consider populating that and frankly the other blanks because I suspect customers are going there regardless just because they are familiar. Another savvy comment from our good friend Jason. Yes, Jason. So what I did is I just went to their website and looked at the segments they specifically identified. I completely agree with you. I think Amazon Business is all over multifamily and hospitality, but they don't specifically have those called out on the slide, or at least if they do, I didn't see them. But certainly they're all over that. I think that's exactly right, and it's an excellent call out. So thank you for another valuable contribution to the conversation as usual. Somebody else is asking, how does the Whitecap and Construction Supply Group merger play into this? Great question from Andy. I would say, Andy, not at all. I think, well, I've always been a little bit mystified why Home Depot and Lowe's have not tried to buy, well, maybe they didn't, I just didn't know about it, but have not bought Whitecap in the past, because that seems to be a more natural add-on to a company that sells to small residential contractors and remodelers than moving to the MRO business. But I think now that, my guess is that Home Depot didn't want Whitecap, and I don't really know, but I'm guessing they didn't want Whitecap or they would have bought them a long time ago. And probably when HD Supply spun Whitecap out to private equity, which happened a few months ago, excuse me, that probably freed up the ability enabled the ability for Home Depot to buy HD Supply, because they specifically wanted the MRO, because that's the business they've been building out, not the pro contractor business. Now the pro contractor business suffers the same cyclicality as the residential stuff. So, or at least there's some similarity. So my guess is and it's also lower margin. So that's probably why they aren't pursuing it. But I think, HD Supply was unusual in combining a construction supplies distributor with an MRO distributor. I don't think anybody else does that. Jonathan, do you?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. So I think by splitting those up, they kind of naturally went into their own categories. And so I don't think I don't think they're related anymore at all. But it's an excellent question. And then let's see, Jason Hein again, Amazon buying an existing traditional distributor is harder than people think it is. The culture at Amazon is really challenging due to the emphasis on innovation and bar raising. If Amazon were to buy Lawson and then have to lay off 80% of the people because they aren't Amazonian, then what are they really buying that they couldn't build? Yeah, I think that's a good point. And Jason used to work in Amazon, so he's got some good insights there. I think the culture, from what I've heard, is very different than at a traditional distributor. So that's probably right. All right. Any other? Look, to everyone in our audience, please be sure to send us your comments and your questions, and you can email us that information's at the end of our slide, or you can go to distributionstrategy.com at the end of this presentation, I should say. And we'd be delighted to answer your questions offline as well. You don't need to expose your name to the rest of the world. Well, actually, nobody can see it when you chat with us anyway, but so one more question from Jason. Thoughts on Zorro becoming the construction and MRO option given their rapid selection growth? I don't think so, Jason. I think Zorro is going to stick with MRO because it's easy to warehouse and deliver in their current facilities, and construction materials is a whole new ball game logistically. So that's my answer on that. Okay, great discussion. Thanks to everyone who has participated in it. And now Lincoln Smith is here. He's the Chief Strategy Officer for HMI Performance Incentives. Lincoln, thank you so much for taking time to join us today and talk about really the the how loyalty can be used by distributors. And I just want to stress to everybody, Lincoln is a friend of ours. We have great conversations with us. He regularly educates us on what loyalty programs are and how distributors can use them. So this is not a sales presentation. This is free training and education on loyalty and incentive programs. So with that, Lincoln, I will hand it over to you and we'll ask some questions along the way.
Well,
Yeah.
I would just add one thing, actually, Lincoln, before you jump in. So I think a lot of us have ideas of what loyalty programs are from the consumer world, and then we also have probably a more narrow view of what loyalty programs are in the B2B world, right? So we've seen the loyalty programs that have trips to exotic destinations, and I think that's the view of most people about loyalty programs. So love to hear perhaps a broader view of what those look like to you.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Ian. Good to hear about the HD, acquisition there. So, anyhow, I jumped in a little bit early there, so I appreciate being part of it anyways. So, yeah, no, absolutely. Ian and Jonathan, there is a, in wholesale, loyalty and incentive programs have been around a long time. They're very popular. They're very effective. But as far as the broad understanding of it across all sectors, maybe, always could be re-educated. So today is just more of a dialogue on why they are important, how they could be structured and whatever types of results that we might see from them. So hopefully listeners, feel free to ask questions and happy to give our advice or our perspective on these types of programs. But, Jonathan, to your point, there is a lot of correlations between B2C programs and B2B programs. And, one of the things I like to kind of highlight is that the B2B programs or, the distributor loyalty programs that we design take a page out of the B2C industry. B2C is oftentimes kind of the leaders as it pertains to, putting together these marketing and behavioral science elements into how they communicate with the customers. So, the differences I would say is that in B2B, they're slightly less, aggressive with the amount of touches and communications, although we do implement communications to your customer base or whoever the audience is. The reward options are slightly, different in the B2B space. A lot of times we're offering other business building items or other value propositions that, a B2B customer might be able to realize rather than everything always being, a personal reward system. So, they are slightly different, but we take a lot of the same elements from B2C and implement into our strategies. And I guess one other quick thing, I'll let you guys ask me questions on it, but the other difference or misnomer, I think, is that loyalty and incentives oftentimes get mixed up when we talk about them. And really, a loyalty program has to do with mindshare with your customer and thanking them for their retained business. And you're giving them another value back for that loyalty and the retention of that business. And the term incentive is really to help engage your customer to grow with you. And so if we're designing an incentive program, the real goal or the output that we're looking for is something that has to do with growth. And if the growth happens, then there's some kind of reward system that your customer would earn from it. So anyhow, loyalty and incentives are slightly different, although part of the same family.
So if you do this poorly, you could end up giving essentially entitlements to customers who've not yet earned it, right?
That's right. And there are some benefits to having a retention program or a loyalty program, without a doubt. But if your intent is to have this paid for by performance, and you've structured a program that's really based off of loyalty, then you're going to be disappointed, maybe either with the results or the financing of it. So, setting those proper expectations and, what are the true goals of whatever your promotion or your incentive or your communications campaign is important to kind of understand on the front end so that you make sure that it's designed properly.
Excellent. Can we go to the next slide, Lincoln?
Yeah, one more thing, just for the listeners, and feel free to ask questions, but these types of programs in wholesale, we see them either being one of three different categories. So a lot of you that are out there listening today, you may have been running or have experienced group incentive travel programs. So those are very common, where we're designing programs for your top customer base to reach certain growth or volume. So incentive travel is one of the types of programs that we see that have been historically very popular and effective. The second type of program that wholesale is using is points-based incentive programs, very similar to your frequent flyer program or your American Express rewards program or your Starbucks. But those types of programs are branded specifically for you. And then your customers are building up currency in points, and then they're able to redeem them for very individual or personalized awards. And then the last component is more promotions. And that might be where there might be a fixed time period, very specific goals and objectives, a specific theme, and then you might be rewarding for something that's very specific and a very defined time frame. So anyhow, those are just some context that I think most wholesalers are familiar with, and they all have kind of their own place and benefit on what it is that you're trying to drive or what results you're looking for.
Do you have examples that you can name of distributors that are customers of yours?
Yeah, definitely. So, over time, we've worked in many of the wholesale segments. So, building materials, automotive, aftermarket, industrial, high tech. So, these types of principles apply to all industries. But, I've personally worked with Annixter, Ferguson, U.S. Air Conditioning, Dakota Supply Group, Wesco, XL Parts, CDW, Beacon Roofing. So, it gives you a good cross section of, the types of wholesale organizations that are utilizing these types of strategies to engage their customer to essentially gain mind share and share of wallet spend.
That's an impressive list.
Yeah.
We have a great question from one of our listeners. Is there a type of program that typically works best for the average wholesaler?
Ooh, that is a good one. It's hard to always generalize, isn't it? But that's a good question. I will say this, that over the last several years, there is a particular rule structure that wholesale has adopted more predominantly than others, and that is running programs that are growth based. And those growth based rewards programs are where we go out to your customer base and take a look at their historical sales and set realistic goals and objectives that they must meet in order to earn. And a lot of times these programs, you might be earning, I'm making up something here, like 1x in reward value up until your goal. Mm-hmm. And then you might be earning double or triple X for the growth dollars. So it's almost like this perfect reward strategy where you are getting the loyalty, the retention, showing the appreciation, getting that mind share for all the purchases that they're giving you. But we're really putting the carrot and the accelerator on those growth dollars. So I would say, if you had asked me, which you did, what's the most popular reward strategy that we're seeing in wholesale today? That has been, by far, probably one of the more popular types of strategies that I've seen as of late. But every wholesaler has its own specific goals and objectives that might influence how you might structure the program.
Is there a correlation between a distributor's likelihood of having a loyalty program and whether or not they have an outside sales force?
Yes, there's, I guess the rationale on why you would do a program or the emphasis would change based off of that. And I think, when you don't have an outside sales force, that you can count on for those touch points or those inflection points, sometimes the loyalty or an incentive program can be more important, or a catalyst to help communicate and engage those customers, where an outside sales organization you might rely more heavily on. Another example of that, Ian, I think, is that even if you do have an outside sales force, there's a lot of unassigned accounts that are part of your portfolio or your customer mix.
Right.
So, you may end up saying, well, this becomes another added benefit. I can't afford an outside sales rep to spend time on that particular account. But this type of communication strategy and this type of reward, strategy really might help out with a lot of those unassigned accounts that really need attention that the outside sales reps aren't able to provide them.
Got it. So like a points program for unassigned accounts.
Exactly. And that's, one of the things I'll kind of walk through here in a minute, as far as, taking a look at your customer segment and maybe some rationale on how you might look at certain segments of your customer base that might be more appropriate to target.
Okay, let's jump ahead here. Oops, I think I went too far.
And I think
mouse is acting up. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And I know a lot of people that are listening won't have the visual, but the other thing that's really important that we see out in the market is that, or perspective, I should say, is that loyalty really is all about trust and confidence with your customers. Do they trust you? Do they have confidence? What is your value proposition? And are you clearly articulating that value proposition to those customers of yours? And loyalty or incentive program can help you define that and communicate it. And ultimately, if you have a strong value proposition, it does build trust and confidence, which will equate to customer loyalty. And customer loyalty is really a feeling about your organization. And that feeling is an emotion. So this is a little bit of the touchy-feely side of what we do, but we do want to pull on that emotion. And it's about mindshare and that emotional feeling that they have about your organization. And if they have a high emotional feeling or affinity to you, then that mindshare is going to be higher. If the mindshare is higher, then you're going to be the first look. They're going to pull into your location more predominantly than someone else's.
So you use a phrase with a lot of syllables, behavioral science, at the outset. And I'm curious what part of behavioral science or how behavioral science plays into this mix.
Well, I think that, and Jonathan, you're going to be a good one to chat and talk through this here with your PhD. But I think that one of the things is that I think humans are irrational, right? We love that we would all be like Captain Spock, or I don't know if it's Captain Spock, but any Trekkie fans out there.
It's just Spock.
It's just Spock.
Yeah.
But he kind of takes emotion out of everything that he does, and it's all about logic. And the human race and our mindset isn't to do rational decision making. And so kind of understanding what are the drivers that make people choose whatever it is that they might choose is really important. And so, the behavioral science of, how you frame things, how you can offer certain benefits that might pull in on those emotions will certainly influence their current buying decisions and their future buying decisions. And understanding those elements can really help make a big difference on that discretionary purchases that customers have.
So Lincoln, it's all discretionary. I
mean, it is
at some level in an organization. And I'll give you an example, right? So if you do any business with, or have any experience with anyone who sells building products, whether that's roofing products or drywall or electrical supplies, I mean, that should be the most rational purchase, right? Because you do the blueprint takeoffs, you've got multiple bidders. The whole process is designed to take the emotion out of it, right? But ask any one of those distributors what happens when one of your top account managers leaves. Boom, all the business goes with that person, right? It's not like you suddenly became a bad distributor. That customer left because they had a relationship with that account manager. That's an emotional decision. And I think that's one of the values of having a great customer loyalty program is you need to build ties with customers that aren't dependent on one person. Because since that's the case in those lines of business, those account managers make a lot more money than account managers in other lines of business where there actually is more discretionary spending. It doesn't make any sense, right? So if I'm an MRO buyer, nobody's watching where my $200 purchases are going, right? So you would think I could reward anybody I wanted. Those people tend to not have a strong relationship with their account managers. There are many exceptions. And the people in these categories that are designed to drive rational purchasing processes have this huge dependency on the account manager. And so having a loyalty program so that your entire relationship is not dependent on this one person I think is particularly important in those categories.
If you think back to what Lincoln was saying about the emotion and the relationship, there's this new field called behavioral economics. And the premise of economics in all the years that we were studying demand curves and that sort of thing was that buyers are like Spock. We are perfectly rational. And what the whole world of behavioral science has done is turn that completely upside down, showing example after example of where people make completely irrational decisions. In fact, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Daniel Kahneman, is that where you're going to go next?
Well, I was going to go to his student, Daniel Ariely, who wrote a book called Predictably Irrational.
Right.
And there's just really juicy sort of use cases or vignettes of where people are asked to make a decision, and you can see how completely not Spockian these people are.
Well, and Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize in economics,
right?
Even though he's a research psychiatrist, because he blew up all those supply and demand models that we learned when we were in college years ago, Jonathan.
That's right.
Because
exactly.
They all depend on buyers making rational decisions and buyers making completely irrational decisions, right? It's like pricing isn't rational either. And you have to just accept that there's an irrational world and act to it. We do have some questions here. So someone's asking, Lincoln, what are your thoughts on incentivizing only for online transactions versus across all channels?
Great question. Great question. With the digital transformation that's going on in wholesale, we understand that there's a lot of investment being made by wholesalers. There's a lot of behaviors that still need to be conditioned to get that adoption and those frequency for online purchases. So a lot of our rewards programs today in wholesale are rewarding for online purchases. It's not typically exclusive for that, although we have seen strategies where it is exclusive to that behavior. A lot of times what we're doing is emphasizing it or weighting it at a higher value. And, the rationale that we're doing for that is that, making sure that, the outside sales organization is evangelizing and adopting the e-commerce, platform and behaviors that we're asking the customers to do now. And then getting the customers familiar with the technology and changing that behavior over to it. So, as I mentioned, you might get 1x on general purchases across the board, regardless of how you make that purchase, but you might earn 3x in reward value if you adopt and or make those transactions online. So I guess the point is that those are immensely important business initiatives that are going on in a loyalty program or incentive program can help out with it. In some instances exclusive, but I find it more common, to have it be maybe at a higher value rather than exclusive.
If you use loyalty points, or can you get loyalty programs funded by suppliers through co-op if you do certain things like, provide an extra amount of loyalty points for their product lines, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we love wholesale. Is that there's other places to go get funding. When you work with the manufacturer, there's nowhere else to go upward to help finance these types of initiatives. So in wholesale, there's opportunities to maximize and utilize co-op funds to help support these types of initiatives. And then the other way, of course, is MDF or manufacturer development funds. And if you design a program and prove that you're going to help drive additional business to a manufacturer, they're willing to listen to you. And if you can build a business case, they're willing to come to the table with additional funds. And I know in today's day and age, it's getting harder to acquire those funds, but they're still out there. And we find that most good wholesaler designed programs have a certain percentage of their overall investment offset by those two types of funding mechanisms.
Okay, good. Let's move on, shall we?
Sure. Yep. I think the other topic, Jonathan and Ian, that we were chatting about is, and love to hear from the audience, but this is other common questions, is who do we go after? And I think we started to pull on that thread a minute ago, but is a loyalty or an incentive program, should it be open to my entire customer base, or should it be to a certain segment of my customer base? Where should I put my emphasis on? And one of the things I encourage organizations to do is to, take a look at their customer profile and take a look at, maybe the last 2 or 3 years of purchases, and maybe even segment them into different buckets. And it might be, the Pareto rule, who are the, top 20% of your customers that are providing you the 80% of your revenue.
Mhm.
Is that the most important customer that we want to address in a loyalty or incentive program? And, or is it that middle 60 audience where we feel that there's a lot of capacity to grow? So maybe that's an audience that we need to spend a little bit more attention to and design a program to shift that buying power over to you as the preferred supplier. And then
So would the incentive be for the middle group and the loyalty for the top group? Is that roughly how it would go?
yeah, I think so. Another term, Jonathan, is that, there's a defensive play and then an offensive play. So, think about, your top customers that are driving 80% of your revenue. What kind of program do you want to design that protects that? I mean, you want to build a wall around that and say, I don't want you going, to, Amazon Business or down the street or wherever the case might be. So is there a loyalty or an incentive or a benefit that we could kind of engage that audience to keep them, rock solid with us? And that'd be defensive. And then that middle 60 audience would be more of an aggressive offensive play, because that there's more on the table. And so, that's where we might design programs that are really growth oriented and, really motivate them to shift that share of wallet spend over to you.
So we have a question, a couple actually, but what is a reasonable expectation, a benchmark of customers that would enroll in an awards program? What percentage of customers?
Yeah, good. I think, that's going to vary by organization, but again, generalizing. Oftentimes, what we would do is, these are invitations. So a lot of times these aren't just open to anyone that's off the street. These are programs that you're offering to your customer base as a value to doing business with you. And again, we can either invite the entire customer segment or a portion of your customer segment, or put an emphasis on it. But I'd say we would normally see within maybe the first year, maybe 50% of those that are invited will opt in and participate.
That's higher than I thought. And so if this person reaches out to you directly with maybe more parameters around their question, can you give them a more specific
Of course,
response
yeah,
potentially?
yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely happy to help give any advice to how you guys are running your program. So
Okay. And then, so when I talked about earlier about how when an account manager leaves, their business goes with them, Jason jumped in and said, well, I don't know if that's going to be true going forward, because we're seeing less and less purchasing through account managers. And I think that's a worthy discussion. I mean, I think certainly the number of account managers who are absolutely fundamental to the customer relationship is decreasing somewhat. My view is that in certain product categories, they're still dominant. They still own the relationship. And even though the customers aren't placing the orders through the account manager, at least, you really don't want the account manager to be order takers. The account managers still have a lot of influence. But I think to Jason's point, that probably is watering down to some degree over time, but that's a double-edged sword, right? So now you're less dependent on the account manager, but you also have, as long as that account manager now has less influence in holding on to that customer as well. So you might want a loyalty program either way. The point is you want more ties than the account manager, but you want some ties to the customer.
Absolutely. And that's where I think a loyalty or an incentive program can kind of help backfill some of those benefits that an account manager historically has provided, but it's not necessarily from a human, but there are, these marketing and communications and other benefits that you're providing that customer for, shifting or retaining that business with you. And, I think, to Jason's comment, we're seeing that these programs are more and more important because of the digital transformation that's going on and the new behaviors that we're asking our customers to adopt. And we're also seeing these programs becoming more effective and more important because of the sales organization transformation as well. So, the way that wholesalers are looking at their sales organizations is shifting. And, these programs can help, with whatever those changes or those adoptions need to take place. We can build in rules, to help, help encourage, that adoption of whatever the new sales channel might look like.
Got it. We had somebody else weigh in and say if a reasonable reward program could be built to engage your customer base to use your e-commerce site, not force them, but to incentivize them. But we covered that, right? I mean, there are methods for doing that without, hard twisting the arms of the customers.
That's right. And I think I know that seems to be a popular comment, here with the audience is that, a lot of times it's sometimes just getting your customer to set up the profile and make that first transaction or the first 5 transactions, and then the adoption or the behavior starts to take place. So
got it. So it doesn't have to be permanent. It might just be incent them to take that one-time action.
It's exactly, or maybe for a limited amount of time, because then they get more comfortable with it, and then they start to adopt that as the new norm. So these types of programs can certainly help out with that.
Another question, is there a segment that typically drives the most ROI of a program?
Yeah, good question. If I have to generalize on that, I think I would say the middle 60 audience, because of the amount of share that they have available to shift. So that's going to drive a lot of ROI is if you can get some of those audience members to be, top producers for you. There's a lot of incremental gross dollars that are in those accounts.
Okay, great. Anything else on this slide you want to cover, Lincoln, or do you want me to jump forward?
No, I think there's just a myriad of different benefits or rewards or behaviors that you guys could be thinking about. But
right.
Yep, and it could be a customer acquisition. In 2008, when we were running programs, there was a lot of receivable issues. So these can be carrots just to even make clients current. So there are a lot of different little levers that can be implemented that can really help your business. And the other one I'll just mention here is product mix is also a really other important element that we take a look at is, are you only buying one segment of my, business from me, and you're going down the street for the higher profit items, and, you can build a program in to reward based off of that mix. And that also can help drive really a lot of incremental profit.
So I have a question for you. So a lot of points programs are aimed around companies, their accounts, right? And then there are some industries that get away with rewarding individual buyers. So people in most companies, they get to keep their airline points and they get to keep their hotel points, even though that's a personal reward for business spending. And how do you get away with that? I mean, is there a methodology that or best practices? Because a lot of times you're trying to influence personal behavior. And by the way, those business purchases get really irrational. I mean, we all know people, I'm sure, who flew Delta from point A to point B, even though the official company policy was to take the lower flight and United was cheaper or Southwest was cheaper, but they, looked the other way and bought the ticket on Delta because that's where their points were. I mean, this happens all the time. So how do they get away with that in the travel industry? And in your programs, do you normally reward the account? Do you normally reward the individual? Are there mechanisms to get away, or that sounds like you're trying to get away with one versus the other?
Right. Yeah, and Jonathan and I chatted about this a couple of weeks ago. I think one of the terms that I use is the point of influence, and I think that's maybe where you're going with this, Ian. Is whom is the right target audience within your customer base that's the right individual that should participate in a program? And again, sometimes that might be the contractor or the owner, and I'd say that's a fairly common audience member that should participate. Other times it might be you might be going after the specifier or the technician or the installer, depending on what industry you are. So that might be the individual that's actually pulling in or picking up the product at the branch location. I was just on a call actually earlier this morning, Ian, where a wholesaler was implementing a kiosk into each of their branches. And, the kiosk is going to be an opportunity for them to capture the technician's information and understand the frequency of which the technician comes into each branch. And what they're looking for is to motivate the tech to pull into their branches, and they didn't have a way of tracking it until they had this kiosk. So the kiosk will now kind of, measure every time that they come in, the frequency and the recency of them utilizing those branches. And they wanted to provide a reward system to kind of reward them. The more that they come in and make purchases and pick up at the branch location, then they're going to be rewarded in some fashion. So that's an example of a tech program. Otherwise, we might be going after the contractor principal, and then really large organizations that might be in the industrial space, they might be prevented from even participating in a program like this. Or if they are eligible to participate, then the rewards that they have available or that might be appropriate for that type of a customer would certainly need to change. And they might be a little bit more business oriented rather than personal awards.
Interesting. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to flip ahead here.
Mm-hmm. And
So we have a new slide about driving results for you podcast listeners only, and or if you can't see the visual. So Lincoln, you want to run us through sort of the thinking behind, these are what principles for driving results, or what's the intuition here behind this slide?
Yeah, well, I know, listeners are asking, what kind of results can you expect, from these types of programs? And again, it all depends on, what are the goals and objectives of your program, and have we designed the right strategy, the right reward system, the right financing of the program to the right audience. And if we do a good job of that on the front end, then, the results will come. But, we do see, these programs do influence, to Jonathan's point earlier, a lot of irrational buying decision. And when I say it's a rational decision, but sometimes, they're thinking about it irrationally nonetheless, if there's something else in it for them. And, we'll start to see those audience members that are participating in this program, they will outpace the growth and the volume of those that are not participating in the program. So, we'll see, organizations where, we'll have, they might outpace 2 to 1, as an example. But again, it really kind of depends on what the goals and objectives are. But we always benchmark those that are participating against those who are not. And you'll see a significant delta between those two behaviors in those audiences that are engaged in a loyalty program.
Yeah, and so you're saying 30% of engaged participants will try or buy an ever before purchased product or service. 40% will have an improved perception of the company. 50% will spend more and increase purchase level after joining the program. 80% will say that the program is a moderate to strong influence on their purchase decisions, which probably is underreported because people don't like to admit that. Let's see here. Another question. Let's see. Great discussion today, guys. Much appreciated. Personally, I've used HMI for loyalty and incentive programs with tremendous success. Great company. Was this a plant, Lincoln?
I don't know who is that, but
we try not to name full names.
Right.
Quick math. Revenue increased during the program qualification in the 30 to 50%. Looking out 2 years after the program closes, averages out to around a 20% increase in revenue. Taking 500 customers and spouses on a 5-day trip to an exotic place builds lifelong relationships. Best investment that a distributor can make. So that's quite an endorsement. And let's see here. And then we have another question. Is there a risk of rewards program overload? What happens when everyone has a loyalty program and they start to compete on terms instead of just on whether or not the program exists? Mm-hmm. So, everyone's got a frequent flyer program. So the question is it really beneficial to anybody? Or is it just a new cost to the industry? It would be how I would characterize that question. Mm-hmm. So how do you differentiate your program?
Well, I mean, I think, Ian, there's a key difference. The airlines is an oligopoly, and there are 500,000 distributors in the United States. So the likelihood of all or even many having loyalty rewards program, we're quite a ways from that, right, Lincoln? I
think so, and it's a good topic, and I've not debated, but talked about this. Is that what are good examples in we're all familiar with frequent flyer and loyalty programs in the airline industry. I think they were the pioneers of it, American Airlines with the Advantage Miles. But I like to use actually hotel loyalty programs as a better example. And the reason I say that is that, an airline, you're kind of at the mercy of the the availability and the lift and your local airport, and the price is going to have a huge impact on it. But hotels, I feel like, are actually a little more apples to apples. Is that if you're a Marriott or a Starwood now, or you're a Hilton guy, or whatever the case is, when we all used to do business travel, you go to a destination and all the hotels would be on the same block. They might be right around the same price. They all have a loyalty program with the same amenities. So the question really becomes, why are you going to pull into one hotel over the next? And sometimes it might be an irrational decision where I am going to pay 10% higher for one hotel over the next. Now, why am I doing that? I'm going to sleep the same, probably at both, the same location. It's actually a slightly higher price.
It's points, right? I mean, it's points. We do it all the time, right?
Your experience there. And there's a term called equity. So if I have equity in one of my programs that are at a higher rate, that has an influence on my future buying decision. So if I have a ton of Marriott points, then I want to keep adding to that equity bank that I have. So therefore, I'll pay 10% higher for that night of stay just to build up onto those points. So anyhow, I like hotels to be another. I think it's a better example of more discretion that's a little bit more equal, but a loyalty and incentive program can really help influence that decision.
Yeah, and I think to the person who talked earlier about when you take 500 customers and spouses on a 5-day trip to an exotic location, I mean, I've been on those trips. Those are relationships for life. I mean,
They are.
He's absolutely right. All joking aside, that is a transformative life way that transforms a customer to a lifelong customer. And what's interesting about those relationships, and I bet you the person who asked that question would agree with this, is ordinarily, if something goes wrong with a customer, they run out of patience quickly, right? And they'll terminate the relationship. But if they feel like you're a friend of theirs, if something goes wrong, they will call you and say, "Hey, I just want you to know I'm really getting concerned. There's a performance issue. I want you to know, and I'm going to work through this with you." And there is no way to substitute that other than having that kind of relationship. And I mean, I've gone on these trips before, and some of those people I still hear from sometimes. And you get personal emails, "Hey, checking in and see how you're doing." I'm not even with those companies anymore. And I hear from some of those people. It's really remarkable. That guy's the Greg who asked the question is exactly right.
Yeah, and I think on that we have a term for that called return on experience, and instead of return on investment. But it is the last thing you want with your customers to be a transactional supplier for them. I mean, you want it to be a partnership, and especially for those top producing accounts, being able to offer them an award and an experience that you can share with them is going to have a residual benefit, and the tolerance that you now have with them as a customer, increases exponentially.
So I want to, sorry, Lincoln, can I ask 2 more questions? One from our audience, then one I have.
Yeah, absolutely.
One from our audience is, any thoughts on reward levels as a motivator? Stay at Hilton because I'm a higher tier at Hilton. Are tiers a thing in distribution loyalty programs? Do you have tiers in your programs typically?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where you might end up going into that customer segmentation again. And, in the high tech space, we see this quite a bit where you have, when we're going after partners, that you might have a platinum partner group or a gold, silver, bronze. But, sometimes there is a benefit to, creating statuses, part of your program. And those statuses could mean additional earning opportunities by hitting those statuses as a customer. And then we also believe strongly that the services that you provide and any soft benefits that you might be able to provide those customers and tying it into the loyalty program and strategy can go a long way. And that might be where I'm making it up here, guys. It's, it might be free freight, by meeting a certain criteria and status, or, a special customer service, a dedicated individual that you can call anytime, no matter what time of night, whatever it is. So statuses are really important in many instances.
Great question. So here's my question. No doubt some people fail when they try to put in loyalty programs. What are the top couple, 3, I don't know what the right number is, of reasons that they fail when they do?
Hmm. Great question. I would say in general, one is not vesting the sales organization.
Hmm.
You're going to go after, if you're going to do a customer loyalty or customer incentive program, regardless if you're going after the buyer, the specifier, the technician, or the principal, whatever your sales organization looks like, you want them to be vested and aware of how this investment and how this is a sales tool for their customers. And if you don't get their buy-in and their understanding on how to use it as a real differentiator, then you're going to be missing a lot of opportunities to create results. So that would be one. Number two, in no particular order here, is under communicating. You have, if you have the best loyalty and rewards program or value proposition and best suppliers, and you don't tell anyone about it, then why have it? So I think that, under communicating, so a lot of people kind of say, all right, I have the reward and, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing an integrated marketing campaign. And that's really something that should take place. And then I guess the last one is, really more from an analytics perspective. These should be living organisms and they should be very strategic. You shouldn't be set it and forget it. This is something that, hey, businesses change, goals and objectives change. Your loyalty program and incentive program should also fluctuate along with your business goals, and don't make it stale. Keep it very, very fresh and relevant to the marketplace.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lincoln. And so Lincoln's contact information is over here on the right. It's lsmith@hmiaward.com. His phone number is there too. You can reach Jonathan or me. Our contact information is there as well. This is the Wholesale Change Show. We're on every Wednesday. Well, sometimes we're every other Wednesday, so check the schedule. Wednesdays at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific time. We're also in the midst, actually, we're wrapping up. We've got 2 more sessions with the NAW for a series called How Technology Will Transform Wholesale Distribution. That's a 7-part series. You can access the webinars and white papers so far by going to naw.org/howtechwilltransform. We urge you to watch that series. Jonathan, as always, it's a pleasure. Lincoln, thank you so much for making time for us today. It was very helpful. I think you contributed a lot to our listeners. We really appreciate your expertise and participation.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Ian. Thanks, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure.
You bet. Have a wonderful balance of your week, everyone. We'll see you next week on the Wholesale Change Show. Bye now.